Good evening and welcome, everybody. This is episode 169 of the Edufuturists podcast. Don't forget you can go back and listen to the back catalogue. There's actually more than 169, but we only just started numbering them a while ago. So I think there's nearly 300 in there over on YouTube and Spotify. And Dan thinks we haven't got 300, but I think there are in all the different iterations that are there.
Yeah, I'm sure you're adding a few numbers on there.
Dan, I've never had numbers on them.
Unless you've been doing podcasts without our knowledge.
Yeah, so the problem is we could be anywhere between 330 or 300, depending what numbers he's been adding.
Yes. I know where you're going with that, gentlemen. Let's stop there before we go any further. It's episode 169 of this iteration anyway. And lads, you've had Steve, we didn't get to see you last week. Tell us what you've been up to. What's been going on?
I'm just trying to think what I did. Yeah, last week I was in Oxford, so I was travelling back from some work with a partner through the business, which was it was a good day. This week I've just come back, so on a 5 times through my course I do face to face. So I'm doing a business growth course. So it's been around international markets growth and development today. So I really enjoyed it. Really enjoying the course. So it's nice to be back learning. And a mixture of face-to-face and online. So, I've really enjoyed that actually today. Yeah.
That's cool. Nice one. Always learning. It's Steve, if you get a chance, go back and listen to last week's episode because we had quite a blast. It was just me and Ben for an hour and a half talking about Web3, crypto, NFTs, future of education.
Getting drunk a little bit.
What talking about?
I did anyway.
Actually getting drunk.
I had more alcohol. I did dry January and then I had beer in February. So it's been the opposite of dry January.
As long as you didn't have a Red Bull or a Monster, then we're all right.
No Red Bull or Monster, and there's none today, so that's all good as well. So I know that we've been looking forward to getting today's guest on for a while, and we have got somebody in the background that's going to join us in a moment. We won't do the long bio. We've give up with them long bios. Apparently, I used to write too much. I talk too much and write too much. So we are moving into a shorter version of this and let the guests talk about themselves rather than do that. And so before we do bring the guest in, some of you will have heard of today's guest, Nicolas Cole from Twitter. That's where I found out about him. And this is the stat that I think I've got to say, even though it's a bio stat, which was that his online content has had over 100 million views. So that's some stat to have, and we've got lots of things that we can definitely learn from him. So he also written a piece called "The Digital Education Crisis," which we are definitely going to get into today. So without further ado, let's bring in Cole as today's Edufuturists guest. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be a blast.
I'm sure it will be. And we know that I did a little bit of an intro. You've some of the stuff there that you've been writing about, and you are a prolific writer and content creator. So I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of an intro to you, how you got to where you are, and then let's go from there if that's okay.
I'll do the 30-second nutshell. I was a pro gamer as a teenager. I was obsessed with World of Warcraft and I thought I was going to be a pro gamer for the rest of my life. Then I got into bodybuilding in college. Went from being a skinny, insecure, introverted kid to looking like I ate my former self, put on like 80 pounds of muscle, and same with gaming, right? Took that to the extreme. Graduated college, got into advertising. My boss was a serial entrepreneur. He really became a mentor for me. I got very interested in entrepreneurship. Ended up building my first company, which was a ghostwriting company. Scaled that to a couple million in revenue and about 20 full-time employees in about 18 months. Happened very, very quickly. Around that same time, got very interested in writing on the internet. I went to school for fiction writing. That's what my degree is in. I have a degree in fiction writing, if you can believe that. And I started writing on a website called Quora with the intention of, how do I become an author? How do I get people to read my work? I want to be a writer. What does that look like in the digital age? Ended up becoming, in 2015, the most read writer on Quora. on the entire site out of about 200 million users. Went from there, had a column with Inc. magazine for a couple of years, became one of their top 10 contributors. Ended up very much just pioneering a way for myself of treating writing on the internet as a game. Again, going back to being a gamer, that's just how I think. I just look at everything as games and levels and systems. And I beat it. I beat the game of digital writing. I accumulated hundreds of thousands of followers, accumulated hundreds of millions of views, had work republished in all these major publications, ended up writing a book about it called The Art and Business of Online Writing, where I basically just said, here's everything that I've created for myself over the past 10 years in one book. Here you go. That book has become a great bestseller on Amazon. And now I run an education business. I actually run two education businesses. One is called Ship 30 for 30, which is a writing challenge cohort-based community, which teaches people how to start writing online. So you've never written anything before on the internet, or you've been writing for a year or two and you're hacking away at blog posts and you're like, why is no one reading my stuff? We put you through a 4-week program and we accelerate your learning curve. And the other is a paid newsletter called Category Pirates, where it's a little bit more advanced. It's geared toward creators who have been doing things for a long time. It's geared toward executives, investors, C-suites, upper management type people, Silicon Valley founders, that type of audience. And it's all around category design. So how to think about creating your own category, differentiating yourself. And that is a paid newsletter education business. So that's the brief nutshell. And there's a ton of stuff we can dive into from there.
It's really interesting, Cole, the way you got into writing on the internet, because I suppose, and you mentioned it briefly, when people do that, when they're like, oh, I want to start writing, people automatically think, I'll create my own blog, I'll get a blogger site or another blogging site and just write myself a nice little blog. And we've probably all been there at one point or another where we're like, you know what, I've got something to give to the world, I've got ideas, and then we write a blog and our mother reads it and that's about it. And
usually my mum comments on it on Facebook, doesn't she? That's the reality of what happens.
But I guess the question is, and it's probably quite a big question, how have you cracked it? How have you? Because dare I say it, when I use Twitter quite a bit, and there's a bit of a boom going on just from my own perspective on Twitter there of young, fresh, dare I say, cool people writing, whether that be threads on Twitter, whatever it is, and really, really kind of boosting education through those means. You seem to be someone who's kind of cracked that, and given the people that I follow on Twitter and recognizing that is kind of an enclosed community of people, but you seem to be kind of the spearhead of that. You seem to be kind of pushing that and driving that, and not only doing it, but also providing the education for others to do as well. I guess back to my question is, how have you cracked it? How have you done it?
Yeah, I'm one of many, there's a lot of really interesting voices and interesting people out there. I can definitely say, if I was a teenager today, if I could go back 10 years, college might not even be in the cards. Even 10 years ago, I told my parents, I don't think I want to go to college. I basically did it because my dad was like, you are going to college, but if I was a teenager today, I would invest a significant amount of time into writing on the internet and mastering that skill of being able to capture people's attention. And I see teenagers doing it now on Twitter, and I'm like, wow, you are so much further ahead than you even realize. To the blog comment, this is something I actively debate all the time with other writers, with other people that are leaders in their industry. I have a very contrarian point of view here, which is, I think starting a blog is one of the worst things that you can do. And my explanation for that is, it takes a really long time, if you're a creator or a writer, to realize that you are not the main character. Nobody cares about you. Like, you think that you're special, you think that you're important, and you're not. Your job is to give something to the reader. And who you are is irrelevant. Like, your story can be part of it, but if you want to in any way have an impact, make money, build a business, sell books, whatever external result, you are in the business of driving that external result for someone else. This isn't like your private journal that you're just putting up on the internet for people to read, right? You're in the business of serving others. And that is a really hard lesson for people to learn. And it takes a lot of trial and error. And a blog is basically a commitment to you going, I'm the main character. I'm who's special. Come to my site that no one knows exists. Spend time in my environment. You know, that the analogy that I use is, instead of going downtown and joining someone else's party, right? There's all these people downtown, they're walking around, there's restaurants, people are going in and out of different bars and clubs. Instead of you going there, you're saying, you're sitting on the sidewalk with pamphlets going, hey, I'm having a nice little house party in the suburbs 45 minutes away. Come join me later. Right? Everyone's like, no, of course I'm not going to leave this happening spot and go into the suburbs, right? Your blog is a house in the suburbs that nobody cares about. So instead, the first big piece of advice that I give everyone is go to where the party is. There's 600 million users on Twitter. Go to where the party is, right? Right there. And once you start there, you are going to learn. This is like the most important part, is you are going to learn what it is that people find valuable from you. You cannot start writing until you know what is your value. And you can't learn that value when you're writing on a blog and no one's giving you feedback, right? So it's like a problem set. I need to learn what people find valuable. So I go to an environment where there's people that can tell me what's valuable. And then I chip away at that over time and I learn, oh, these are the stories, these are the perspectives, these are the frameworks that people find valuable. And then over time, sure, you can double down on that and then you can start creating assets. But you got to go through that learning process first.
That's fascinating about going where people are, and especially when you're saying things like go to Twitter, or you went to Quora as well, in the same kind of concept. People are there. How do you kind of manage that whole conversation, that the value that obviously we know that, well, we don't know, but there's argument there that Twitter is kind of and Facebook are creating that shock value and what people wanting to see things that everybody pays attention to, whether that's shock in a good way or in a bad way. How do you manage that then, in terms of saying you want to go and add value in the place where people are, but if it's kind of set up as an organization to keep people interested and attentive, how do you manage that, where it might be negative criticism or hurtful stuff or mansplaining, whatever else it could be?
So, basically what you're signaling is they're two different conversations. You know, one is a moral conversation. You know, do you agree with big tech and fake news and negative comments and algorithms, right? That's a moral conversation. The other is a much less moral conversation and more of just a brutal truth. This is how it works. Do you want to play the game or not? Do you want to beat the game? Same thing when I was playing video games as a teenager, right? Like, you can stare at your screen and yell all you want about how the game is unfair, but like, those are the rules of the game. So you either get good at the game or stop playing the game, right? And so part of it is, if you want to succeed on the internet, you got to learn the rules of the game, and you got to learn what are the content types that get distributed and what are the content types that don't get distributed. And the way that I like explaining it is, it's like learning a musical instrument. I played classical piano for 20 years. Same game. You know, you got to learn the rules of the game. You got to learn the scales. You got to learn the chords. You got to learn some of the theory. And then you can break the rules. You can do what you want with it. So if you notice, you know, this is one of the big things that I try and point out to people is, a lot of the creators on Twitter, a lot of the creators on Quora, a lot of the creators on Medium, they all use the same formats. They're the same. You know, they're the same types of lists, they're the same types of stories, they're the same structures, but the content inside them is different. I make it different compared to someone else's story, compared to someone else's story, compared to someone else's story, right? So part of the game is learning, hey, these structures work. Like, this is a big thing that we teach in Ship 30. If you structure it this way, 50% higher chance that someone's going to read it. So just learn the structure. It's a template. Right? And then plug in your own ideas, your own opinions, your own stories inside that structure. So a lot of it is just kind of foregoing I don't want to say foregoing the moral conversation, but not getting caught up in the esotericness of it, and instead just understanding these are the rules of the game. If I want X result, I got to play by these rules.
Absolutely, and that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And I think that idea of infinite games and finite games, that conversations that come up there, and about if you are playing that game, I think it's interesting actually, where you said you started as a World of Warcraft gamer, and then you've done your classical piano, and then you've done bodybuilding, and it's almost the obsession with it, and it seems like you're throwing yourself, when you do something, you don't do it by halves, do you? You're doing it by,
No.
you go all in. So how does that kind of work for you? Because obviously, is it that you get bored at a certain point once you've beat it, or do you feel like there's longevity in some of the stuff that you do, or is it just like a certain time frame?
Yeah, I mean, in the past with interests of mine, some of it was out of my control. So, like, for example, when I was a gamer, this was before the whole esports gaming trend. Like, I was a pro gamer before gamers were even putting videos of themselves on YouTube. Streaming wasn't a thing. It was unheard of. This was 2007. Like that world was the absolute beginning of what it is now. So there was a big part of me where, right when I basically quit, because I was kind of like, I know this is going to be an industry, but I just got to college and there really isn't a lot for me to do yet. Like, the mechanism for me to make money and do these things wasn't around. So all of a sudden, I quit, and then a year later, the industry starts maturing, and I'm like, well, I just took a year off, and in gaming terms, that's a lifetime, and I was old and rusty, and now I'm done. Right? Same thing with bodybuilding. I lifted for like 7 or 8 years, and there were two major decisions. One was, you have to start doing steroids. Like, I got to a point where I was like, hey, if you want to compete, I had the perfect diet, I had the perfect training routine. I was already just maxing that out. All my other gym friends were like, yeah, the next step is steroids. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So that forced a decision. And then in 2016, I injured myself. I herniated a disc in my neck while I was lifting, and I haven't been the same since. Like, it completely just obliterated that passion for me. And so that was a forced decision, so, okay, there goes fitness as an option. So the thing that's always interested me about writing is, I believe that I can do it literally until I die. It is something that you can do whether you're 17 years old or 75 years old. And I think that is what that inspires me to pour so much time into it, because I'm like, wow, if you're lifting in the gym or you're a pro athlete, you have like maybe 10 years to do your craft, and then your body gives out. But this is something I can do for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. I'm just like, oh, I can't wait to see how good I get at this, So I think, yeah, it's just a personal, I'm just very driven by mastering things. I just love the journey of it.
And I imagine that it's very difficult to get to a point of mastery in writing, because like people do write until the end of their lives and whatever else, and still people find stuff that they've written years and years previously and that's hidden, and you're never going to get that. I wonder if because a lot of our listeners will be in education, we're going to get to that soon, but a lot of our listeners from an education perspective will probably feel like they've got a book in them, like Dan was saying there, or feel like that you're writing copious amounts of content, and you're getting and you're helping other people to write content. How do you keep coming up with ideas, and how do you keep that fresh and in a way? Yes, you're saying about the structures that work, but how do you make sure that content is continually adding value?
I've been writing for a very, very long time. My mom always says I started writing in 4th grade. There was a poetry club in my 4th grade class, and apparently I was very excited to join it. I don't remember this, but I've been interested in writing forever. I've been journaling for as long as I can remember. I've been journaling every day and documenting it for the past 10 years. When you do something enough, you really start to realize how much of it can be systematized. That's been my biggest takeaway. And that's why I think I'm so passionate about now sharing what I've learned with other people and building this education business. Because whenever someone says, I don't know what to write about, that doesn't mean that they don't have anything to write about. That means they haven't learned how to create ideas. And coming up with ideas is a skill. It is a system. It's not, I always use the metaphor. It's like, it's not you put on a chapeau, you light a cigarette, and you stare out the window and wait for inspiration to strike, right? Like, it is a skill, and you have to build the skill. And so a quote, something that I repeat, a mantra over and over again to myself and to everyone that I teach is, the more you write, the more you write. The more you write, the more ideas you come up with. The more ideas you come up with, the more you have to write about. The more you write and publish, the more feedback you get. The more feedback you get, the more ideas you have to write about, right? So it's like a wheel, and it's like a boulder going down a mountain. And the more you do it, the more momentum you gain. So when day one, my biggest problem was, what do I write about? Day whatever now that I'm at, my biggest problem is I have too much to write about. Now I have a different problem called, I've got too many ideas. I have to pick and choose which ones are worth my time. And so a lot of these things, when people say, I don't know what to write about, or I don't know how to hook people's attention, or I don't know how to organize my ideas, all of these questions, there are systems that answer them. There are formulas, there are templates there. And that's what my whole book was about. That's what the whole curriculum is about, is like, literally follow this template. That's enough to get you started.
It's interesting that, and I've delved into some of that, and started using TypeShare as well, which kind of shows you some of those templates and that the kind of formulas for that content creation. Do you think there's a lifespan of that where it'll kind of reach saturation? I'm just thinking a bit like, and I'm not comparing it to this, but a bit like how clickbait works. When those types of articles first started coming out, you're like, oh God, I need to know what happens. Click it. Will those types of like thread formulas on Twitter, will they reach a saturation where someone kind of reads that first tweet in the thread and be like, it's that type of tweet again? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think broadly the answer is yes, and that's why the game is always evolving. That's part of why I love writing on the internet and the concept of digital writing, because it's a game that last year had slightly different rules than this year, which will have slightly different rules than next year. I love that. But at the same time, you would be amazed at how many headline formulas, for example, work today just like they did 10 years ago. And if you pay really close attention to like news updates that you get on your phone, right? Like, those headlines haven't changed in 20 years, and even though there's little tweaks, maybe there's little words that, like, in the past 5 years, right? The word habits. Oh, everyone's obsessed. Habits. How do I build habits? Frameworks, habits, right? So words might kind of accelerate or grab people's attention, but the structure of the idea, it's never going to go away. Like, everyone wants to know, what's the system to solve X? Right? Or everyone wants to know the story of, like, I started here and I ended up here. Those frameworks, you can change the words around, but the idea is never really going to go anywhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you've then developed this into I think it'd be cool to talk about, maybe get into the stuff around category pirates now, because I love this, not just the idea of the content that's coming out of there, and that in itself is phenomenal. But I think it's the idea of being a pirate, and I wonder if we could start there. Why being a pirate is important, then maybe move into category design for after.
Yeah, the idea of being, category pirates, and really the idea that we're communicating is, most people root their thinking in the way it is today. And so what they do is they go, the world is the way it is today, and my job is to take the way it is today and make it better. And that is not what innovative people do. Innovative people go, I reject the way it is today. It's already tomorrow. The world is different. And my job is to move wherever we are now over to that different place. And you have to follow the thinking because it leads to really different results. So I'll give you an example. If you start with the way it is today with a car, okay, the way it is today, gasoline powered engine, internal combustion engine. If you take that and you go, my job is to improve the way it is today, what do? You go, well, I gotta take internal combustion engine and I gotta make it faster. I gotta make it more fuel efficient. I gotta make it more optimized. I gotta get 0 to 60 faster, right? Whatever, I gotta make it cheaper, right? That line of thinking will never get you to an electric car. It won't. Your starting place is an internal combustion engine, right? In order to get to an electric car, you have to go, I reject the way it is today. I do not need an internal combustion engine. How else can I design a car? Oh, maybe I can design it using electricity instead, right? You're starting from a different place. And so this as a framework can be applied to everything. And so kind of maybe as a good context for our conversation is the world of education is making a massive mistake right now. The mistake is called the world is the way it is today, and our job is to digitize it. So you take the classroom today and you make it digital, or you take the way we teach today and you make it digital, or you take a lesson plan today and you make it digital, right? And what people don't understand is that when you follow that thinking, all you're doing is you're going, I have an internal combustion engine and I want to make it faster. I want to make it cheaper. The opposite side, right? Ship 30 is a great example. You need to start with, it's tomorrow already, right? Reject the fact that you need to be in school for a year. Reject the fact that college needs to be 4 years. Why can't you get to the transformation in 3 weeks, right? Why are we measuring success via time? Why are we measuring success via grades, right? You have to reject the way it is today to imagine what is the different path for achieving a not better result, but different result, right? Like my goal isn't how do I make people better writers? My goal is the world online is a different world. You have to learn how to write in a completely different way. So everything you learned about writing a school essay is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. I can't start there and make it better, right? I have to start somewhere else.
So from a pirate perspective then, why is that pirating? Is it I suppose, is it because we aren't following the mainstream? Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, I mean, hey, why being a pirate is the best thing you can be.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that just means you go around and any aisle you want to sail to, you can sail to, and you don't play by everyone else's rules. And like so much of education is it's not about learning, it's about unlearning. Right? Yeah. Like you spend the first 10 years, 12 years, 15 years of your life being told, this is how you write essays. This is how you teach classes. This is how you read, and then you get out into the real world and you're like, wait, all the people that are having the biggest impact and achieving the most and receiving the most upside are people who are ignoring all the rules of the game.
Yeah.
And
they drink rum. And they drink rum. So
yeah.
It's not like it's not a pirate as in stealing, it's a pirate as in doing whatever
go your
you
own
want.
way.
It's
yeah.
You're doing almost like a punk mentality, really.
I can't stress enough. Like I went to school for creative writing in college. In 1 year, this digital writing cohort-based community, Ship 30, we've probably taught more students than my entire college did over the course of a decade. We had 1,300 writers in our January cohort, 1 month, right? That is not possible in an analog classroom. It's just not. And so when I look at stuff like that, I'm like, my teachers, like I'm just going to say it really bluntly, like my teachers don't understand what I'm building, right? Because they're rooted in I taught in a school for 30 years, right? All I can think is internal combustion engine. How do I make it better? And you can't get to where you need to go by starting with the way it is today. And that is a huge problem with education, is like the solution isn't, I took my classroom and I put it onto a portal on the internet, right? The problem is, hey, all your students they want to learn via TikToks. They don't want to learn via 90-minute long lectures. And when you tell that to an analog educator, they just get frustrated and they just go, well, it shouldn't be that way. Well, again, it's like we were talking about with games. It doesn't matter whether you think it should or shouldn't be that way. That is the way it is, right? Rules of the game, right? So you can either learn the rules of the game and play to win, or you can sit there and yell at your computer about how the game's unfair.
Yeah, it's true, and we noticed that during the lockdowns and over the last 2 years when schools went online. Schools were almost praised for replicating the physical classroom online, and books were written. In those 2 years, books were written to show you how to get as close to the physical classroom environment online within a video call. And the three of us, we're with you here, Cole, because we're all the way through that, where we called that out. We called that out as it was happening, and that online learning is very different from what you describe as analog learning.
And it's interesting as well, because we had a guest on, a UK stalwart in this area. He's in his 70s, Bob Harrison, who basically said online teaching, is not online learning. It's not equal just because you can deliver it. In fact, he got really mad about people talking about delivering online delivery, as if it's not, you deliver food, you deliver it's not, you don't deliver learning or teaching. And he used to get really mad about it. So yeah, this really resonates, and I know there'll be a lot of people listening today who will be resonating with this and just saying, yeah, you're right, it just isn't today anymore. We've got to think about tomorrow.
Yeah, and something, this has been a very recent realization for me that I think is fascinating. I'm sharing this because it's also something I'm thinking about a lot, and so as a forcing function for me to keep exploring this idea. But so much of education people think of as, this is what you're going to learn. You think about, okay, I'm signing up for this class. Here are all the things you're going to learn. The reality is that the student is sitting there going, yeah, that's cool, but that's like you telling me I need to eat healthy. I don't really want to learn. The student doesn't really want to learn. What the student wants to do is get to a different place, right? If you want to learn how to code, do you really want to learn how to code? No, what you want is you want to be able to build your own app. It's a difference, right? It's the difference between learning versus outcome. And so the mistake is going, we have an analog classroom, and now we just digitize it. Your assignments are online, your portal's online, your class is on Zoom, right? All we did is we're just digitizing the thing that already exists. All the innovation in education is, let's throw the learning out the window for a second. What outcome are we driving? You want to build your first app. You want to write your first article online. You want to write a book in 30 days. You want to, what is the action, right? What is the transformation? And then you can ask yourself the question, well, how do I facilitate that transformation in the easiest, fastest way possible, right? You might not need 4 years of college in order to facilitate that transformation. Maybe someone can figure out how to do it in 30 days. Well, if you're a student and you see someone who goes, I guarantee that I can give you that specific transformation in X amount of time, all of a sudden the allure of going to a big university goes out the window, right? Because you're like, yeah, that's cool. I'm sure I'd love to go party and drink for 4 years, but I really want the transformation. So, okay, I'll spend $1,000 on this online course and you're going to give me that transformation in 30 days or 60 days or whatever. That's what they're paying for. And this, I think this is going to be the hardest thing for the education world to wrap their head around, because teachers love talking about these are all the things you're going to learn from me, right? It's very ego.
Yeah, and also as a consequence of the mindset of some is the worry and the concern that if it's outcome focused, we say, right, well, we'll just focus on the exams. And the output is we get them ready for the exams just to pass that exam, which is actually not what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But actually in the closed mindset of what some have, and that's globally, not just focused on the UK, it's then, okay, the outcome is the exam, let's prepare them for the exam. How do we shift that then to be a different conversation of a different outcome to what we've imagined over the last 20 years in education, which is the goal is to prepare them for the exam.
Yeah. What do you? No one cares about the exam. I don't care if I get an A. I care if I get a job. Right. I care if I make money. I care if I connect with someone I look up to. Right. I care if I can go viral. Right. It's the outcome and the nuance here that is so hard for people to understand is they go, oh, well, then you're just trying to make it all shiny and like you're just promising this end and then everyone's just right. That's not what's happening. You can't walk up to someone and go, for the next 6 weeks, you're going to eat broccoli. Right? No, that doesn't get anyone excited. You have to go up to someone and go, 6 weeks from now, you're going to run a 6-minute mile. You're going to be super strong, right? You're going to look completely different. Your skin's going to look amazing, right? You got to paint the transformation. And then they go, cool, how do I get there? And you go, okay, well, hey, week 1, we're going to put you through this. Some of it's a little broccoli, but this is the transformation. And I'm going to get you there. And everything that you do is going to get you to that transformation. It's not what do you want to learn.
Do you know, that's really interesting. I had an old boss who basically said to me, what's your goal? What do you want to achieve? And I've talked about like earning a decent salary and having this and that and the other. And he said, yeah, but the salary isn't the outcome. Yeah, the salary is like kind of the start of the outcome, but actually it's what you can do with that. Just the ability to be able to, do you want to be able to take your kids on holiday? Do you want to be able to set them up for their lives? Do you want to be able to buy their first car? Do you want to be able to pay for the wedding that they want to? That's what you're talking about, isn't it? It's not just saying let's think the outcome is, so where Steve's saying the outcome has been the exams, that's like the outcome is the wage. Ultimately, we're talking about, well, what does that then allow you to be able to do? That's the dream that we're working towards.
Yes. And I feel like, there's a lot of really interesting, like if you were to draw a Venn diagram of what we're talking about, it's such a mix of everything from education to sales copywriting and positioning, to organization of how you're walking the person through that transformation. You have all these different skill sets and digital skills, right? How are you communicating it? What platforms do you need to use? What integrations are required? So you have all these different skill sets that are overlapping. And what I tend to notice whenever I talk about this with educators is there's this feeling of them going, well, I shouldn't have to sell the transformation. Right? It's almost like a posture where they're like, I'm special. You should be honored to learn from me. These are all the things that I'm going to teach you. Right? And again, it's the same thing I learned with writing. You are not the main character. Get it out of your head. You are not what's important. The student is the main character. The reader is the main character. You are in service of them. You are irrelevant.
Do you know, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with some teachers just this week and talking to them about this idea of when I first started teaching, I used to say those things. I've got my degree. I've already passed I've got my A star in religious studies. You need it. And I've got, I used to say those phrases. And then I look back now and I think to myself, my experience of education was very much the teacher was the font of all knowledge, because there wasn't information overload, or it certainly wasn't the equitable access to that information like there is today. And I was saying to some teachers, actually, increasingly, the information exists and the information is just, they have got access to this now. So actually your job, and one of the phrases that you use in the article we're going to get into in a moment, is that teachers become curators, don't they? Teachers become almost, rather than you are the person that delivers or the communicator of that content, they find that information, and actually you've got to help them curate that and use that effectively.
It's unreasonable to think that today a teacher would be an expert in every possible vertical that is required to enable the student to achieve the transformation. You know, I'm a great example in what we're building with Ship 30. I have a very high skill set in a very specific niche. Anything in digital writing, I got you. You know, I got you. But the moment that I go outside that niche, I'm probably not the best person. But that doesn't mean that I've done everything that I can for the student. If the student wants to learn about automations or integrations, my job isn't to pretend like I'm the expert. My job is to go find the other expert and go, this is the person you should learn from, right? You're curating the experience. And so that's why in our course and community, we have the things that we teach, and then the things that are outside that core area, we go out and we pull in other experts and go, here are all the other people you should be learning from. And so, and same thing, when you first start writing on the internet, you might feel like you're not an expert in anything. Great, you don't have to be. Go curate other people's stuff. You know, you can be the person who said, I just read, I went through the information or the material from 100 of the best financial experts on the planet. Here's what they had to say about saving money in your 20s, right? Your job is you went out and did all the hard work of organizing the information, and you're coming back and going, hey, I just saved you 1,000 hours. I did it. Here's what everything that you need to know. So there's these two different types of educators of, I'm an expert in my niche, know that, but once I go outside that, curate other experts to support you. And then two is, you don't even have to be an expert. You just go, I went out, I did the research, I did the hard work, I curated it all for you. Here you go.
Yeah, and that's a massive shift, isn't it? It's a huge mindset shift from an education point of view, and it's something that we definitely champion, and definitely think there's a shift in sand, and going from being the expert in the room, like you said, we can't be an expert in all the verticals, like awareness of what is your expertise or where you can find that expertise. I love that. So I think it makes sense. We've kind of touched on some of the stuff that you've been talking about in this article, the digital education crisis, and this is probably one of the most important things I think I've read on this. And I wonder, you've talked about this idea about native digitals and native analog. I think you play around with that phraseology, and actually I really like your definition there, by the way, which is, because when you hear people talking about digital natives and that phrase, it's actually a bit of nobody came out of the womb being able to use the iPad, so it's not like they were born that. The way you describe it, I wonder if you could tell us what you mean by that, and then get into why you think it's a crisis, and therefore, and then we can talk about where it goes.
Yeah, this is, it's hard to talk about this without, usually both sides of the table in some way are like, you're being ageist. It's not about ageism at all. Native analog means, if you're over the age of 35-ish right now, you grew up in a world where technology was an addition to your real world. So you live your life, you have your friends at school, you sit down and have dinner with your family, you call your friends on the phone, and technology supplements your real life experience. If you are a native digital, you are 35 and younger today. And that's actually not what's happening. A native digital, your primary reality is the digital world. You spend more time, and in many cases, your brain was formed in the context of, my friends are online, my social life is online, my parents are online, my conversations are online, my meetings are online, my classes are online. every single thing I do, my identity is online. And so your primary reality is the digital world, and the real world is almost an inconvenience to your digital world. You know, it's like, imagine the kid who's sitting at dinner communicating with their friends on their smartphone. Their parents like, hey, you got to put your phone down because we're having dinner. And they're like, right? That is them saying, you're taking me out of my primary reality, right? You are an inconvenience to my primary reality. And again, we can debate about whether that's good, bad, moral, immoral, whatever you want, but that is what's happening.
I think that's been around a while as well. I remember, I'm 35, and I remember being...
Only 35?
Shut up, man. I remember being about 14-year-old, and we had in our living room in our house, we had this big desktop computer sat in the corner. And I remember, I've got four brothers and sisters, and when we get in from school, we were allowed, I think my parents had worked out, we were allowed 45 minutes each on the computer in the corner of the room. So this would have been early 2000s. And I remember going on and going every night straight onto MSN Messenger. And talking to the people at school that I was too shy to talk to in real life. So mainly girls, to be honest. But and I think what you're saying was so right. And like having that life online. And then when I was told, 45 minutes is up, it's your brother's turn to use the computer, I used to be so pissed off. It was awful. It was like someone was taken away. But yeah, I suppose it's been around for a while, hasn't it? And the fact that we're still struggling with that concept.
Yeah, you're right on the edge. I'm 31. You know, if you're between 30 and 35-ish today, you know, we were right at the beginning of this. Like I remember life before technology really did that, but I was also really young when I had my first cell phone and email address, and I was hooked. I was gone, you know, like the internet was my world. And I think the reason why this is so important is if your primary reality is in the digital world, your identity is in the digital world, you spend more time there, and how you think about communicating is very different, right? Like I noticed that I have a very unique skill set because I spent my most formative years in high school communicating on a massive multiplayer online role-playing game via text with people all over the world. You know, so writing on the internet, I hear very differently than like my parents do, you know, because I was so immersed in it. And so you have to think, when you have that language, think of it like a different language. When you speak that different language and an analog educator comes in, and even if it's digitized, even if it's over Zoom, right? And they talk to you in that different language, you as the native digital are sitting there going, you and I are on such different pages, right? And this is the chasm that is really hard to bridge, is that it's not just you take an analog educator and you put them in the digital world. That's like, you know, taking an American and putting them in Japan. You know, it's like you're not going to speak the same language, and you need to have the self-awareness to realize that you can't speak the same language. So you got to reorient your thinking. And it's almost like, you know, I believe that young people have a lot to learn from older people, and older people have a lot to learn from younger people, but it's like remove the age. It's like native digitals have a lot to learn from native analogs, but native analogs have a lot to learn from native digitals. And you have to be willing to learn to speak this new language. Otherwise, you're done.
Yeah, yeah, and it is different language. I was talking to someone today, and they're like, I'm not computer IT like savvy, so can you just start really slowly? And so I was doing some training today for them, and they're like, can you just start with where I need to press to turn this thing on? And you're like, yeah, you're right. And then there's an assumption when they get into their their thing, their niche, or whatever else, they flick into this. I now am the expert in it, but it's that awareness, and I suppose it becomes it does become a bit of a crisis of identity for people in here. Is how do I relate to people that are different from me? You talk about education needing to be atomized, and increasingly it is becoming atomized, and I think that is the picture that you're talking about there, really, isn't it? It's that idea that it's not, and I really resonated with the example you talked about in terms of marketing. You can't just say let's learn marketing course. Somebody wants to learn about SEO marketing or affiliate marketing or guerrilla marketing. And you should learn from the best people to be able to come to that, shouldn't you? If you want to become a guerrilla marketer, well, or you need to learn from the person who is smashing that. And you call them category kings and queens, don't you?
Yeah, and it's already happening. So old world, right? I want to learn to write, so I go to a college. They have a writing department, which is what I went through. But wow, that writing department is not going to teach you the 27 niche skill sets that you need, and it's really hard for someone to be that proficient in all those different things. And so what you're seeing now is you're seeing someone like me who goes, I have something hyper specific. I'm going to teach you how to start writing online, and maybe even more specific, and I'm going to do so via how to start writing on Twitter. It doesn't really get more specific than that, it's just that. And then after someone goes through that course, they're going to go, well, that's really interesting. I also want to improve my note-taking system. So then they go to a different creator, and that creator goes, all I do is specialize in helping you get your note-taking system up and running. And then they go, great. And then they go, well, now that I've got my note-taking system up and running, I've learned I really like writing. I also think I might want to create YouTube videos. You go to a different creator. All I do is help you learn how to get started building your YouTube channel, right? And so you have one student that goes through 10 different creators courses, and each one could be anywhere from $100 to a few $1,000, and they're still spending a fraction of a university degree, or at least that's the way it is in the States. It's completely, absurd what college costs. And they're still spending less, but they're getting such specific knowledge from each of the teachers that they're choosing. It's a completely different way of thinking about learning and up-leveling your skill as a human being.
I'm just interested as somebody's nearing their 40s, what this means for me. I'm in my head, I'm just sitting here listening and I'm thinking, I get it, but I'm thinking that cutoff, is there a finite cutoff of 35? Does it have to be that specific, or actually is there?
Steve still wants to be a native digital.
I'm just thinking in terms of my behaviours. Is it in my head? I think I act one way, and I'm actually unconsciously not. I'm just trying to kind of put it in, and I'm trying to work through it. I'm just thinking.
Steve, you would then be a learned digital. So I think of it, right, because it's a spectrum. And native analog, I think of as it's the person, it's like your maybe a parent, or maybe an uncle, or maybe a grandparent that shows up to dinner and is like, I'm not savvy with the internet, and they can't allow themselves to learn at all. They're almost bowing out of the game. Okay. And then you have native digitals that are like, I'm 14 years old and I already understand how to create, email lists and automation sequences and all this stuff. And you're like, wow, you are speaking a different language. And then you've got all the people in between that are learned digitals. Doesn't matter what age you are, but they go, I am committed to learning this new language. And you can do that in a bunch of different ways. Like in Category Pirates, my two business partners are both, 10, 20 plus years older than me. True, native analogs, but they become learned digitals because they partner with me, who's a native digital. So I'm able to leverage their skill sets. They're able to leverage mine. We work together. Another way is I'm going to go invest in a course that teaches me the native digital skill that I want to learn. I pick a creator. I go, I want to learn email automation, or I want to learn online course setup, or whatever it is. So I think all of these things can be learned. It's just part of it is orienting your headset and going, my starting place is that I didn't grow up where I already spoke this language fluently when I was, 15 years old. So I'm just going to assume that the way I'm looking at this is probably wrong. And I do that. I'm 31 and I'm already interacting with 20-year-olds where I'm like, whoa, like I'm very tech savvy. You are light years ahead of me. I have things I need to learn. I'm probably looking at this wrong. And I think that's the important thing, is like walking into it, understanding you're like, I am not fluent. I need to learn.
Yeah, we kind of intimated in the introduction there about the conversation that me and Dan had last week on the podcast about Web3, and it's something that we've been talking about and we talk offline about pretty much all the time because we are just fascinated by it. But it's that whole, you kind of give an example there of almost the NFT conversation you have with somebody where they go, well, can I not just I can just print and copy it.
Just take a screenshot of it.
Just take a screenshot of it, and you're like, dang it, you just totally missed the point here that we're talking about. And it's that, isn't it? It's that idea that just because we don't understand it, and you talk about the metaverse in the article as well. And this, I'm hearing loads of people talking about metaverse at the moment who tend to be in that native analog age group, who are just saying this is really dangerous for our young people. We need to protect them at all costs away from the metaverse. So yeah, it's
but the thing that I like pointing out is, of course, everyone, it's shiny object syndrome. Everyone loves gravitating to the next big trend or whatever. And the thing that I really like reminding writers, but also educators, is that this idea of Web3 and metaverse and NFTs and all this stuff, like, it's very exciting. I'm very into it, very into crypto. I've experimented a bit with NFTs. That's all cool. But the reality is that less than 10% of the population is going to be meaningfully invested in that, figuratively and literally, in the next decade. Like, we still have a publishing industry where it's okay for a big publisher to go to a writer and go, we'll give you 10 grand for an advance and we own 90% of your product. Right? Like, the publishing industry operates as if it's 1996 still. So don't even worry about Web3. Like, we're not even in Web2 for the publishing world. And education's the same way. Like, sure, like we can have fun conversations around how is decentralization and blockchain and crypto all going to impact education. But the reality is most classrooms can't even figure out how to get their students on Zoom. Right? So like, we still have a long way to go. So it's almost like, I think more of the opportunity in the next 20 years is getting all the people that still have their headset oriented in it's 1996 and just getting them to like 2012. We're not even there yet, and that's where the biggest education opportunity is.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I look at this a lot and I read a lot about it, and I think about it a lot in terms of and I see it as I've called it like a decentralized education. So, and I guess it fits with the pirate model really, in terms of coming away from the center to do what you want to do essentially. And we're seeing examples of that popping up. So we had Josh Darn on the podcast, who started the Synthesis School after starting a school with Elon Musk, and the way they're doing things purely online around problem solving, and there's lots of examples we could go through, and it's almost like, and when you look at like kind of that, is it the diffusion of innovators model where you got the early adopters, and it almost seems like we're in a time where the early adopters aren't just going to be early adopters, they're going to be so far advanced to what the rest of the population are. So if I'm already thinking, I've got a 1 and a 2 year old, and I'm already thinking, I don't want them to go through a fully mainstream education model. I really don't want them. So I'm like, how do I supplement that with maybe some online on courses from Synthesis? Look, trying to get them to the away from the center, away from into that pirate area, into those pirate areas where they can learn and be outcome based in their learning. And I really see kind of, especially with education, coming back to education, and I suppose you could say this for finance, you could say this for ownership. how far finance is. We're taking cryptocurrency as another example, is moving away from the established way of doing finance. How education is moving so far away from the established way of doing education. How ownership is moving so far away from the established way of providing proof of ownership. We could go on with loads more examples there. It's almost like there's going to be a breakaway group of people who are operating at a completely different level. And it's
already happening.
Yeah, but I think that what worries me is, and putting my kind of moral head on, is what about the family down the road who all they know is to trust the government. They trust what the state education offers them. They trust whatever's happening at their local school. They don't know about an online course that's happening in America that you can put your kids on at 6 o'clock in an evening, and they collaborate and work with kids from all over the world to solve problems. I just see that the equity of access getting larger and larger and larger, and I don't know where that ends.
I do too. You know, I forget. I did a trip recently in the U.S. Maybe it was my brother's graduation. He graduated from the University of Iowa here, Middle America. You know, and I was there and I was looking around. And I was like, wow. You know, I spend my day to day worrying about, am I at the cutting edge of crypto? And these people, you know, have no idea that even the most basic resources are available. Like, they use the internet and stuff, but they're not in the know, you know. And I look at that and it's a both and, you know. The equity is going to separate. It's going to be harder, you know. Access will be harder, and yet at the same time it's easier. You know, anyone can hop on Twitter and all of a sudden be immersed in it. I think the thing that's interesting, even with like digital schools and stuff, is that people want to learn from people. You know, each of us on our phones, right? Like, each of us has very different concepts of reality. When I open my social feed, I have a different reality than you do, you know? And so what's going to happen is, if you take that container, well, I want to learn from the people that are in my reality, right? I want to learn from the creators that are in my digital reality. So as a student, a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old isn't, their first thought isn't, oh, I'm going to go to this like formalized digital school. They're going to be like, no, I follow this really interesting creator and they have a YouTube course. I want to take their YouTube course, you know? So I think, and again, it goes back to then the teacher thing. Like, yeah, you're a teacher. You're also kind of a little bit of an entertainer, but you are in service of the student. Like, you are there to give them the thing that they need to transform from X to Y. And that's your only job.
Yeah, and we say that in the UK. I'm not sure about America, but in the UK, it's become very popular for schools to ban mobile phones. So you can't bring a mobile phone on site, which is considering, you
just banned their primary reality.
Yeah, and the fact that they probably learn more from that phone than they ever would in school, but yet you're saying we've got a monopoly on learning.
And so, by the way, this was something we talk about in this letter, right? It's like, you're banning the mobile phone, but all the most valuable skill sets on planet Earth right now, and all of the most valuable skill sets on planet Earth over the next 20 years are going to be within the mobile phone. So you're literally saying, put away the thing that's going to unlock the most access, freedom, choice, put it away, and now sit in a classroom and learn skills that are continually becoming less and less valuable. How is that going to prepare anyone for anything? Right? That's the crisis. That is the crisis.
Yep. And it's that crisis of not everybody knows, not the people that are making the decisions, and you make this point really clear, are those people who have grown up in a very different world. So I think it needs to be that way, haven't they? And I think I get the impression that we could talk and talk. Steve uses the line quite a lot. We could talk all night about this, but we do appreciate that you've given us your time today, and we really appreciate the way that you're thinking, the way that you're writing, and you're giving insights to the world that we need. And it's great to hear somebody's voice who's talking like this as well. And I don't know if you could just tell our listeners where they can keep in contact, find out what you do, and find out what you could. If you could just kind of let people know where to find you, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, easiest place is these days probably Twitter, Nicolas Cole 77. All same stuff's on my website, nicolascole.com. But if you DM me on Twitter, I'll hook you up with a discount code for Ship 30 or something. Just let me know you listen to this podcast, and that'll be cool. But I try and respond to everyone. I'm a very, very big believer in paying it forward. I think if you've learned something, you should share it with someone else. So I always try and just, share what I've learned, and I'm going to keep learning and keep helping other people get up to speed and learn. Yeah, well, thanks, Cole, for coming on today, and for all your insights. I'm sure that we'll be in contact and want to speak to you again soon. Thanks very much. This was a lot of fun. This is a great topic. So anytime you guys want to jam on it, I'm game. Thank you. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.